A dancing museum is the title of today's discussion and talk, and brings together, I think, two very interesting protagonists in their field. On the one hand, Tino Sehgal, a visual artist with a kind of past in dancing, or an experience in dancing. And on the other hand, Boris Charmatz, who's a choreographer and dancer, who actually is interested in the notion of a museum.
Usually when we think about Musée de la Danse, I just ask people, what would it be for you? For example, you specifically, you know? What do you have in mind when I say Musée de la Danse, dancing museum? What's the first thing you would like to see? Or do? Or experiment? Or how do you see it? Or do you hate dance? Or do you hate museums? Or what do you think dance could do to museums? What do you think museums could do to dance? Why is dance always related to playground in museums, animation? Why isn't it connected to war? These kind of things. I was thinking the main problem in museums is that, okay, pictures and videos are very easily connected to dance, because we always think dance has a visual impact, where as a dancer, I work on my body in front of a mirror, or then in front of cameras, and there's a direct connection to photography and video. So if you have a dancing museum, maybe the easiest way to do it is through videos and pictures. And the problem with that is that you look at pictures and videos as traces of the actual performances. And it's much better to think a little bit like this photographer did for me. He's called Nigel Shafran. I didn't know him. Do you know him? I think that it says something that I like. I'm not sure I'm a big fan of this picture, but for sure what I like is that the original dancing of these kids does not interest me that much, but through the photography, he could get something that interests me more than the original event. And I think this is something that could then say, okay, I don't like so much pictures of performances or pictures as traces of dance, and then we will build a museum that would be the organization of traces. But we could think the medium, the photography, the video, the written text, even performance itself, not as reconstruction, not as collecting traces, but inventing a new way to perform, or to present and to experiment dance. Because these days everybody is concerned about how to save performances from history. What do we do with Marina Abramovich's reconstructions, reenactments? What do we think? What can we do? And when I started this project, Musée de la Danse, 1 year ago, I was pretty sure that the big part of this Musée de la Danse project was not to collect. How do we save performances from dying? How do we save Abramovich from her own reconstructions? But how do we invent a Musée de la Danse? How do we invent a collection? How do we produce a museum? So not so much how the museum has a shape to bring the art in, but how the invention of this museum could be the art to be done now. And then on this very strange wedding of musée and dance, on this level, architects, curators, archivists, historians, actors, theater makers, dancers, choreographers, citizens could have something to say.
The mausoleum is probably a good point. That's a bit how museums are very often described, mausoleum for objects or art. And what's striking is that you actually renamed a centre chorégraphique in France into a museum. And probably knowing that in some contexts museums have a pretty bad reputation or connotation, like petrifying objects and freezing things, movements. So why this choice?
I was thinking the invention of a museum could really bring something, and because it does not exist really, then we could really dig into these things. And the Musée, I discovered that a lot of the dancers were afraid to have a kind of Madame Tussauds museum, right? To be, and at first I would always say, no, it will be a live museum of dance. It will be, but then after a while it became very clear that I was more interested in the mausoleum than having a live museum. So this is why the first thing we did was a kind of Madame Tussauds night that we called To Strangle Time, where we asked usual performances that the duration, we didn't invite forced entertainment performances that are 8 hours long for one night. We invited normal time frame performances, 1 hour, but we decided to stretch them to the night so that people would enter a museum where basically it was only about slow. There was a party, but it was a museum of slow, right? There was a dance class, but it was a very slow jazz class. Then there was, so this idea that you are afraid of Madame Tussauds, come in, you know? And basically I'm thinking, you are afraid of the hospital, you are afraid of the mausoleum, this we should face.